Okay, so how's everyone enjoying the symposium today? Wonderful. Should I speak? Can you guys hear me? All right. Did it. Oh, my computer just fell asleep. Oh no, it's because it's when you sandwich laptops. Did you guys know that the magnets turn one off? Don't sandwich Macs. All right. It's a real first world problem I figured out. All right. So today I'm going to be talking about the synesthesia of Howard Hova. My background is a little bit unique. So I started out as a musician at 13 years old, and I grew up performing with the Mannheim Steamroller and Trans-Siberian Orchestra and Rod Stewart and Josh Groban and Mary J. Blige, all these like amazing people. And I really thought I knew what I was doing when I was 21 years old, and I was like, okay, I've seen it all. Nothing's left to really surprise me. Until one day on my very last music theory course in college, I was about to graduate and become a musician, do, essentially what I was gonna be doing. But then our teacher decided to kind of kill time at the end of class. And he gave us what he thought was a really interesting tidbit. He said that some people can physically see sounds. And there was a pause, it's just like a movie. And I was like, duh, I mean, what are you doing? It really hadn't occurred to me that other people didn't have the same experience. A lot of things made sense. I was a really horrible study buddy for ear training in college, so I was never able to really explain how I was able to do things. And when I did, it just was way too confusing, and I would just stop talking. But after learning about synesthesia, which I would later learn that this was called, I really wanted to dig more into the neuroscience of it. Now that I knew that the perception of reality was essentially subjective, I wanted to get to understand synesthesia and be able to describe it in a meaningful and helpful way. How many other people out there experience synesthesia, but they had no idea, like me, that they had this ability? So since finding out about synesthesia, I feel like I've become more introspective with how my mind works, and because of this, I've been able to sort of hone it into these different weird skills that I have today. And I really want to give other people that opportunity to understand how their mind is working and to find cool human tricks with it. So, sometimes words fail me. I am horrible. And since my pitch to color synesthesia with this seeing sounds ability is very visual, I wanted to find a visual way to describe it to people. To me, that just made the most sense, because whenever I tried to describe it with words, I'm very bad at it. And I had this idea with my husband, this idea of what if we had a violin that would glow colors as I played it, so that way you could see what I see in real time and have a real tangible way to describe what's going on. And by doing this, I really hope that people would find a mirror into themselves. Like, oh, wow, now I see what you're talking about. I have something similar, or maybe not that, but whenever I do other things, I experience color. I wanted to start this conversation because synesthesia is not as rare as originally thought. Now, my husband and I toyed around with a lot of different ideas with how to get this idea off the ground. So the first one was to get LEDs and kind of strap it to an electric violin. And although it looked really cool and kind of industrial, it did not give the effect that we wanted. It gave us the colors, but it was not the same experience. With the LEDs outside of a typical electric violin, it did not glow like what my experiences were. Whenever I hear a sound, the colors don't just like, bam, green circle, done. It's this glow, and it's in 3 dimensions. It's not very well translated into a picture. So we looked around at other options. Here's an idea. What if there was a violin that was clear? And we put the LEDs inside of that. But at the time, there was nothing available that was affordable for us to essentially tear apart, because at the end of the day, this could definitely become junk. So we decided to go the long, hard road, which was to 3D printed. Who here does 3D printers? Yeah. All right. So, because of this, we decided to try to 3D print our own violin for this reason. So I call it the longest year and a half, and it really shows what great lengths we will go through to describe our world to others. And we started making a violin one line of code at a time. Usually when you see the final product, it doesn't seem like there was that much work in it. But in reality, we started off knowing nothing, and you guys can do this too. It is completely possible. So, looking back at this, the evolution of it was completely hilarious. We had no clue. The very first thing, oh no, he's cut off. That's okay. So, the very first phase was the stick revolution. So, of people here who do 3D printing, who here uses OpenSCAD? Yeah, oh man, you need to talk to my husband. We started off doing OpenSCAD, and because that was what we knew. We knew how to do math, we knew how to code, and in OpenSCAD, you essentially write these functions, and it makes a 3D model. That's essentially it. So this was the very first Hovalin. Can you believe that? That was it. Yeah, have lower standards, right? So this was the very first print that we made, and even though it looks like a random remote control, and who cares, it was the very first Hovalin, and it was the very first time that we had made something from scratch. And it wasn't just us downloading a 3D model off of the internet. And you really need to start from nothing in order to figure it out. The next thing we did was we tried to add different parts of the violin. That's where your thumb would rest. And it kind of evolved over time. We kept spending time on this part of the violin because it had to be right. That was the part where your fingers are essentially spending all their time, and you're using muscle memory in order to play it. Now, at this time, we were pretty much stuck on the neck. We couldn't go any farther, and we started debating what really is a violin and what is like the MVP of what we needed in order to make this happen. And it turns out it's not too straightforward a question. Does anyone have any idea what the most basic violin is? Bro, it is a stick. A stick that can sustain a considerable amount of force because there's a crazy amount of force coming down from the pegs and coming up from the bottom of the violin. Essentially, all sitting on... There's actually a guy who plays a really mean national anthem on a baseball bat. You should really Google it. He's fantastic. I couldn't believe it. So just like how anything you sit on could technically be a chair, we just needed a stick that would play music. But, however, there was one other thing that we didn't think about. There turns out to be a reason why violins are shaped the way they are, and it is because of muscle memory. The upper bout, where the violin's neck meets the body, it really needs to be that shape so that way you can anchor your thumb as you go into higher positions. And you need to have a peg box and a saddle. I just call them nubs because it shows you where you're at in first position. If you don't have those, you're flying blind. You have no idea where you're at. So this began the awkward stage. It's one of my favorite stages. We bought another 3D printer because we're crazy, and we made it all one print. It was a stick, but we made it work. This is actually the very first Hovalin.
Ready, kitten?
Sorry, we
You
really
ready?
like cat.
Okay. Here goes. Woo!
Did it. Oh, we were not done. Yeah, kept going. But to come from a sad remote control to that was really meaningful. It was, at this point, it was more than just trying to create a product that would allow me to share my pitch to color synesthesia. And we just had to stick through it. We had to see how far we could take this. So we had a bunch of failed prints like you do with 3D printing. Yeah, you know. So, for example, this one, the chin rest did not finish. So Then we made this one, which is one of my favorite horrible prints, you guys. That was an entire block of plastic. Do you know how much that weighed? Like 50 pounds. Not worth it. So at that point, we thought, hey, let's not make it one piece anymore. This is not fun. Let's break it up. So we made it so that there are several different pieces. We started with like bolts. And then we're like, okay, let's make a little bit more pieces. That could be fun. But then we were stuck here. At this point, keep in mind, we were still using OpenSCAD. Everything was in math. So we couldn't quite get it to a place where it could expand very far in 3D. So we got into Autodesk Fusion 360. It's a really great program, yay Autodesk. But funny story about that is that as soon as we got into that, we were almost done. And I was really butthurt about that because it was like an entire year and we should have just started there. So threw out everything and went to Fusion 360. And I call this the plumpening. We kept trying to make it so that there are several different quadrants, if you will, so that way we can fit it on a consumer level 3D printer. And this was too many pieces, we decided. So we cut it down to 3 pieces. It really just kept going. But this was the final version of this idea. Does anyone see the problem here? All right. What was that? What? Oh, yeah, it also has 2 strings, yeah. But so the pegs, which are normally at the top of the violin, we were like, let's be cool and put them in the bottom, like by the body. And when you tune it, your shoulder's in the way. So it turns out we had just reverse engineered a violin. We were like, oh, that's why they look like that. So that was a year. So I call this the Great Tuning Peg Migration, which essentially completed the final design of the violin. We started, this was when we were in bargaining phase. We tried to use ball bearings to try to bring the tuners a little higher up into the body, but that was just not meant to be. So we revisited the top with the pegs. This design was too tall. It didn't work. So we ended up with a sort of cube. And that is where we ended up. It was almost done. That was our almost there. And then we're at V1.0. This was it. We finally made it. But our journey was not complete because we had to put the LEDs into this violin now. Now that we finally made it, it took a year and a half. And a lot of hard work. I just really want to emphasize how hard it was to even get to 1.0. And you guys can do it too. You can totally do this too. So after launching, we made this guy. So I am going to show you the violin that we were really hoping to make. Can we cut the slides real quick? Yeah. Another setup. Get in there. Hope it's picking up. Oh, I don't have, Matt, do you have the duet? Oh, where's Mr. Duet? Technical difficulties. Okay. There he is. I thought so. Clearly. Yeah, here we go. Let's have a round of applause for Matt.
Hi, guys.
Yeah. Keeping the show going. You're the best.
While I'm setting this up, why don't you tell them a bit more about what's actually happening when you play it?
Oh, sure. So, when I play it,
Check, check. All right, I guess to kill time while this is going, I want to talk about my experience working with Kate. So Kate has synesthesia, and I don't. And from the outside, I had to figure out what the heck is going on, and how do I make sense of when she's saying, "Oh yeah, it's just like got to be a really green tone or a really blue sharp." And so what I was really lucky that the notes that she experiences, the colors that she sees when she hears specific notes, map perfectly to the white notes on a piano. And so because of that, we were able to make some simple code that, if you can imagine every single octave of a piano, every single C on a piano, being able to say, oh, cool, they're all red. So luckily, Kate had a very not complicated form of auditory synesthesia, which made it possible for us to write the programs to drive this violin.
And everyone is different. So just because I have certain colors doesn't mean that's correct, and we all know this. Yes. Okay. I don't think so. Oh, yeah. Actually, how about this? Yes, let's do QA right now while we're setting up.
Yeah.
What did you say? That's a really good question, actually. So I have an issue with the black keys. If it's typically on a white key on a piano, I can see it really well. But when you get to the sharps and flats, it's a different shape for me, and it's harder for me to see. So let's say open C, the note C on a piano is a sphere. And when you go to C sharp, it gets into this weird keyhole territory. I don't know. So it's more difficult for me to see sharps and flats than it is open notes. But they still have colors, but they're very dark, and it's hard to really decipher. Guy in the back. Oh. Okay. Oh, sure. So we have, do you mean the 3D printable files? Oh, we could. I think we have it in a GitHub repo.
Yeah, I've posted all of the files for I have an Ableton patch, a Max MSP patch, which basically every single note, if you could imagine, for every octave there are 12 notes, and each of them is mapped to an RGB value. So it's very easy to just patch that. Granted, this is again taking on the assumption that someone's synesthesia is repetitive over every single octave. Obviously, that's not the case for everyone. But people that have something similar, it would be very easy to change the software to match them. Oh, here we go. Here we go.
I can't get
This is what we want. If I can click on that guy.
Yes.
Maybe do the thing. Yeah.
Of course, this is happening.
Okay.
All right. Yes. Well, we.
Yeah, we can. Okay, cool. So now it's going out of.
Mhm.
Oh, you got the. Oh, nice. Okay,
It
now
is
I'm gonna put the
output
this
left.
That's mapped. Now should be going out.
Woo. Yeah, man.
Okay, so it's going out of out L, which is this. So now we should be getting signal. If you're getting signal, how's the signal getting in our system?
Yeah, that's what he's.
Okay. It's not getting in our system.
Why don't you try his input again?
Why don't you play one of the
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, why don't you try the one more time? Oh, because it's off. Why is it off?
No, it's fine.
Yeah, it is. It's off. Well, yeah.
put a lab on you. See if we can.
Oh yeah, here. I got an idea.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
All right, this will be. We're just gonna do this. Yeah, we just played through
Just
these
doing it.
speakers.
Yeah, intermission, right?
If that, I've done that before, and it's been
Not horrible.
okay. Intro speakers. You guys have all been great. Thanks for
Yeah, thank
working
you
with
so
us.
much for working with us.
There you
I
go.
don't know why it's not working though. Oh yeah, then have me plugged in because it is working. Yeah. Let's just skip so that way. Come on.
What's up?
Turkey.
Okay, let's start.
There we go. All right.